I'm Neal Simon. I'm the son of an immigrant and a family man.
Hey, Dad.
And now I'm running for the U.S. Senate. In my state of Maryland and across America, they're playing partisan games and getting nothing done, and it's crippling America. We could change the course of history for this country by listening, bringing people together, finding common ground.
I am committed to, number one, not caucusing with either party. So I would be the only U.S. Senator not to caucus with either the Democrats or the Republicans.
Welcome back to the Cannonball Mindset, and today is a first for me because I am going to interview I don't know, are you a politician yet, or do you have to be elected in to be a politician? It's the act of running make you a politician?
I think I am now officially a politician, but I have spent almost my entire career as a business person.
Right. So I'm sitting here with Neal Simon, who is running for U.S. Senate in the state of Maryland, my home state. So it was awesome. I got to meet you at an event, had a great couple-minute conversation with you, and said, this guy would be a cool individual to have on the podcast. So I thank you for giving up your time, especially in what is now October. The idea of giving up time, I'm sure, is crunch time for you now.
We only have 42 days left. Every minute counts.
42 days left. That's crazy. So let's start by doing this. Let's start by you just telling people a little bit about yourself. I have a host of things going around in my mind. I found a ton of stuff about you online. Because you're a businessman, a successful businessman for a long time. You have a great college education, you have a great story, immigrant parents, you have all this great background. But let's get a 30-second elevator pitch with who the heck is Neal Simon.
So I'm Neal Simon, and I'm running for the United States Senate. My background is mainly in business. So I've run 4 different companies, all in professional services, so all companies where I've been surrounded by a lot of smart people with a lot of different ideas and a lot of energy, and my job, as much as anything, has been to try to bring them together, try to form some kind of consensus to get things done. My most successful business was an investment management business called Highline that I started in 2002 and sold in 2015. Then I was asked to be the CEO of the company that I sold it to. But I'm on leave from all that. I'm now a full-time politician. Yes, I'll say the word,
You're a
but a new politician. I've also spent a lot of my life in service, and mainly through nonprofits where I've been a volunteer and my kids have been volunteer, and my wife, and I've been a board member of a number of nonprofits. I currently chair the board of one of my region's largest nonprofits called the Greater Washington Community Foundation that gives away $70 to $80 million a year, and have chaired other nonprofit boards and have been involved with the Capital Area Food Bank and Interfaith Works and the Montgomery County Community Foundation. So service has always been a really important part of my life as well.
Awesome. So let's. I want to get this question right out of the way quickly. Why would somebody who has a pretty incredible, it appears from the outside, pretty incredible life? You got great job, great career, great education. You're married. You have daughters.
I have 3 kids, two sons and a daughter.
Two sons and a daughter. You have a great family. From the outside looking in, seems to be a pretty magnificent life, not knowing you, but from the outside looking in. Why the hell would you want to get into politics?
Yeah. So it's funny, I get asked this question all the time, and it generally has one of 2 tones. From people from government, the tone is, so why are you doing this? Yeah. And people in business say, why on earth are you doing this?
Right.
But I am doing it because, like so many people in this country, I have been frustrated with the bad results we get from our federal government. And I look at all the important issues that people care about and that impact our day-to-day life, whether it's our healthcare costs or investing in the future in infrastructure and improving our education, or whether it's resolving social issues like immigration or reducing gun violence or securing Social Security or reducing our debt. We're getting nothing done. And so much of it is because of the partisanship that we see on the Hill. And I, like so many people, feel unrepresented by the far left and the far right, and have yearned for a government that I felt was working together on our behalf. And I had been talking about that for years and complaining about the dysfunction and expressing a vision of how this can work better to many people around me in business and with my family at my kitchen table, and finally was encouraged by a number of people to consider running for the United States Senate, and about a year and a half ago, I decided to do this.
So I have a lot of questions that, in just that response, I have a lot of things going in my mind, and one of them is you're running as an independent. So you talked about the far left and the far right, and the independent seems like now it's a tougher. I'm saying, wouldn't it have been easier just to pick a side? I'm saying in this day and age, it seems like everybody's on a freaking side somewhere. Wouldn't it have been just easier to pick a side rather than try to go down the middle by yourself?
There's no question it would be easier, and the parties have done a lot to control our government system. They've changed a lot of the rules to make it much easier to run as a candidate from the major parties. But you should know that there are no political parties in our Constitution, and it is not supposed to work this way. And in fact, a lot of our founding fathers feared that one day Americans would develop more loyalty to party than to their country. And I think that that's what's happened. But it would have been easier to be part of a party. But I don't want to represent the 10% of the people on the far left or the 10% of the people on the far right. I want to represent the 80% of us. And yes, it is a number that big that are somewhere in the middle, that think of themselves as center left, center right, or center, but feel politically homeless in this day and age when we have extreme leaders screaming at each other all day long and getting nothing done.
Yeah, so let's go back to the beginning. So I ask this question every week of some of the most successful people in the country, and the question is, when somebody sees somebody like yourself, and they see somebody that has a great college education, great background, great career, white picket fence, they usually think that you either were born into it or that you lucked into it. But that's really not the case with most people. I'm saying you're the son of an immigrant mother, right? Mm-hmm. Tell us about the story of the adversity you had to do to get where you are.
Right. So I was not born into it. I did work really hard for all the success I've had in my life, but I think some of it is luck. So I would say I've lucked into some of that as well. My background, my mother's an immigrant. My father's parents were both immigrants. They all came as teenagers. My mother, I think, was 18 when she came. And they came to this country because they felt like it was a place where you could work hard and do well. And I believe deeply that America should be a place where you can work hard and do well. And they also came here because they thought it was a place you can get your kids a good education. And at that time, our education system was among the best in the world. It's now average compared to the rest of the industrial world. So that drove them to come here. I grew up in a household where my father worked 6 days a week. The only night we had dinner with him was Friday night. We would wait till 8 o'clock and have to stay home, even in high school when we wanted to go out, to have dinner with my father, and he'd work Saturdays also. And all my grandparents worked their tails off. Sadly, my father's father died when he was really young. And that's the environment I grew up in.
So now when did the idea of leadership did you start to see the traits of leadership come out in you? So you talked about you were the leadership of this company and that company, and now obviously to be a U.S. Senator, it takes a certain amount of leadership. At what point did you start to develop these skills, these traits, that see yourself as a leader?
I feel like in my life I have often been pushed into leadership positions or asked to take them. I haven't necessarily sought them out. I did in high school, in fairness. I was my class president for 3 years. So I did. My only previous experience running for office was as class president in high school for 3 years, and so I'm undefeated in elections. But it's been a long time. But then during my career, I started in management consulting with a company where I was for 7 years, and was asked to take on bigger and bigger leadership responsibilities, and ultimately became the COO of the company. And as I've gotten involved in nonprofits, I've been asked to serve on boards and then to chair boards. And so I feel like in a lot of ways I was pulled more than pushed.
Yeah. So so when you're pushed into this leadership role, it still takes a certain amount of a desire to want to lead other people. I'm saying you're running for a company right now that has 100 seats basically, right? So there's 100 senators. You're running for one of these seats of one of the most powerful positions in the United States. So it takes a certain amount of desire to want to do it. how do you deal with that, knowing that you are going? As many good things as I read about you online, there's people on the far left or the far right that don't buy in. So you set yourself up to, when you take these roles, to be criticized. And so how do you get ready to withstand that? How do this is a desire that you're walking into.
Sure.
Right? You're not. If somebody said, well, we want you to be U.S. Senate, but I don't really want to be it, you probably wouldn't have much success. So a certain amount of you really wants this. How do you withstand what's about ready to happen?
Clearly you have to want to do this, and I've
Right.
decided that I want to do this, and I have never been half as passionate about anything I've done in my career, just because of the impact that I think I could have as a United States Senator. So my company that I am on leave from for the past year has about 100 people, and almost all super smart, energetic, advanced degrees, a lot of different ideas. And again, my role as much as anything was to bring them together. It is hard to run an investment management business. We manage about $6.5 billion, where people have a lot of different ideas, but we need to come around and come together on what we're going to do together. And that was as much my role as anything, especially when you got strong, diverse sets of personalities. And I think the United States Senate is starved for that. What we've got today on the United States Senate is, first of all, you have two teams. You got people who show up to work. They put on blue uniforms and red uniforms. They put on their blue face paint and their red face paint. And they take out their weapons of the day and they go to battle, right? And what we need instead is a group of people who are committed to working together to try to find common ground. On so many of these issues, I think there's a lot of common ground. Well, even on the divisive ones like immigration, there's definitely common ground there. If you talk to Americans the way I have, there's common ground, and yet we can't get anything done. It's been over a decade.
So why is that? Why is it that we can't get things done? Why is it that we're stuck in this perpetual state of frustration, arguments, blaming? Why is that?
Well, I think the parties thrive on the divisiveness. It is much easier to throw red meat out to your base than it is to do the hard work of finding common ground and perhaps compromising in order to get things done. You feed that to your base, you rile them up. They're the ones that fund your elections. They're the ones that show up and write you letters and call and will canvass for you. And that's what our leaders are doing. They are much more concerned about winning elections and raising money and winning an argument and looking good on the news than they are actually getting anything done.
Yeah. I think that most people are convinced, let's say most people, I am convinced that more politicians are worried about the title than the contribution.
I got to say, so when I started on this, someone said to me, Neal, you need to make them fear the other guy. Think about that. You need to make them fear your opponent. And I don't buy into that. Yeah. But that's the mentality on Capitol Hill. Make them fear the other side. And when you realize that that's what they're trying to do, you see through it every day. Yeah. I think one of the real tragedies of our current time period is that so many Americans are losing faith in their government. They're starting to see through the narrative. You've got two teams who choose the stories that they want to tell, who choose the facts, they omit the facts they don't like, they exaggerate the ones they do like. And rather than working together to find truth and find solutions and get things done, and so many of us are just so tired of it. It's such an ineffective way to run anything, and certainly an ineffective way to run the world's greatest country and greatest and largest economy.
So I look at it from this almost the same perspective, different lens point in the sense of right now, because the far left, because the far right are so divisive, so bitter, and just nastiness. I think it's what's happening is I see it, and I see maybe I see it on social media or when I travel a lot around the country, and that people are getting fed up. And what's great about when people are fed up is they start looking to themselves more and the government less.
Right.
They start realizing that, hey, I can't count on my senator or my politician, which is such a horrible mindset. But I need to count on myself now. And they start to become more dependent on themselves, and it's making way for independence to start to rise. People start saying, I want the everyday guy now. I don't want the career politician. Do you see that? Do you see that the career politicians are going by the wayside now, or that they're starting to get a little scared?
There's no question that America is starved for something different. Yeah. So I didn't vote for President Trump, and I'm not supportive of a lot of what he's done, or most of what he's done. But I do think his election was a response to the feeling that we're describing, this feeling of frustration with our government, of a lack of trust in our government, of feeling like we've got leaders that only care about winning and themselves, and they don't care about their constituents. His election was a symptom of what was already out there, a symptom of the divisiveness and the ineffectiveness. And I think that that feeling is still out there. And people talk about a blue wave, but I really think it's an anti-government wave in a way. It's just a feeling of frustration. And what I'm trying to do, there are all these people in the middle. So the Pew Research did this study last year where they put 10% on the left, 11% on the right, and then it's 79% that are either center left, center right, or center. That 79%, we tend not to get involved. We tend not to march in Washington, send letters, make phone calls, fund primaries, vote in primaries, fund candidates. And I need to galvanize that 79%. I need to get all of us who don't think of ourselves as extreme one way or another to care and to get involved, because too many of them are throwing up their hands. I hear this all the time when I'm out in the campaign trail. People are just fed up. They're like, I'm sick of this politics. And they're throwing up their hands, and that's not okay. We have to stay involved. We are a democracy. Once everybody gives up, good things are not going to happen.
Yeah. So how do you plan on doing that? I'm saying this is the way it's been for hundreds of years, right? It's getting worse and worse and worse, obviously. But how do you plan on doing that? Like, what's the first 100 days of Neal Simon Senate look like?
Well, first thing we got to do is win. So the way we're doing that is I've been out in the field. I've been in every single county in Maryland multiple times. We've got this great RV that we travel around in. I've spoken to tens of thousands of people in Maryland. Our message resonates. People want this. They want it desperately. They are craving leaders who bring us together. I think about John McCain, who just passed away. And a few weeks before John McCain died, he talked about his greatest career regret, which was not appointing Joe Lieberman his vice president candidate when he ran for president. Now remember, Lieberman was a Democrat, moderate Democrat, and that actually at times was an independent as well. And McCain was a Republican. And had they run together, I think they would have won. And imagine having a president and a vice president from two different parties standing there together in front of our nation, leading together. We are starved for that, that feeling of unity. And so that's the message that I'm getting out there. And people just want it. They really want it.
Yeah, so all right, so you win. Let's go on the premise that you win. You win, then what?
So I am committed to, number one, not caucusing with either party. So I would be the only U.S. senator not to caucus with either the Democrats or the Republicans. So on every issue, they've got to come to me, figure out where I stand. And I'll tell you where I stand. I stand with the people of Maryland. So I'm not going there to represent Chuck Schumer or Mitch McConnell. My opponent, Ben Cardin, has voted with Chuck Schumer 97% of the times. You take out a few minor votes, it's 99%. You almost wonder, why is he there? If he's just going to vote with Chuck Schumer.
If two people always agree, we don't need one of them.
So I'm there to represent the people of Maryland. So on every issue, they got to come to me and say, where do I stand? And I'm with the people of Maryland. So whatever is better for the people of Maryland, that's where I am. And I will propose legislation from the middle that does not have a D or an R next to it. And think about how much more likely it is in order to have legislation passed if it doesn't have a D or an R next to it. Right. The problem today is anything that has a D next to it is dead on arrival with the other half.
Right.
If it has an R next to it, it's dead on arrival with all the Democrats. And nothing gets done. And you'd have someone who can be a sane, moderate, proposing legislation from the middle on a number of issues where I think there's a lot of common ground.
So what is the number one new challenge you faced with getting elected? I'm saying, is it the fact that Ben Cardin's been the Maryland senator, U.S. senator for seems like forever?
He's been in office 52 years. He was first elected as a legislator in 1966.
52 years, right? So he's a career politician that people will literally just vote on his name alone, right? So because even if the way the human mind works is that people like comfortable, even if it is bad comfortable. And I'm not saying he's bad, I'm just saying that even if it's bad comfortable. So how do you overcome that?
So our challenge is not the message. People
Right.
want this.
Right.
I'm so convinced of it. They are desperately starved for it, in fact. Our challenge as a candidate that is not part of either major party is to convince people that we can win. Because everyone's got this natural skepticism about independence. And even though there are, by the way, 2 current independent U.S. senators, there is currently an independent governor who's doing a terrific job.
Yeah.
People are still naturally skeptical, so we have to convince them. So for us, important things are, we've actually outraised Ben Cardin year to date financially. He had a head start, but we've outraised him year to date. We've outraised the Republican by, I think, 50 times or something like that. We have to convince him we've got a great team. So my campaign manager is the guy that ran Governor Hogan's campaign successfully 4 years ago, and then worked for him for 2.5 years. And we're starting to see poll results that also are showing that, hey, this guy can actually win. So we got to convince people that we can win, and then once we do, you start to get more and more momentum. And that's what happened in some of these other states where independents have won statewide office. Often what happens is that you run ahead of the weaker party by enough that you start to make it a 2-person race. And we think we can do that here.
That we can get into a 2-person race. So how do you right now, as a politician running for office, how do you relate to the younger voter? How do you relate to, right now you got to think about how many generations are in the voting world right now. So there's 5 different generations, 6 different generations that will vote in this, 5 different generations that will vote in this election. And a baby boomer is going to vote much differently than a millennial, and their needs and wants and desires and thoughts are completely different. So how do you reach all of them? Because you can't just galvanize the millennials, you can't just galvanize the baby boomers. How do you reach all of them?
So we need to use different methods to reach different parts of our audience. But since you started with the younger voters, I'll start there. I had a 24-year-old the other day say to me, our generation does not understand why our government is 2 teams trying to beat each other every day.
Right.
Why isn't it one group of people working together? So I think in the younger generation, there is this intuitive understanding that something is wrong.
Right.
And our target is kind of middle age vote, meaning sort of 30 to 65. That generation really gravitates towards us. And the hardest, in a way, is the oldest voters who have been voting with one party for 50 years. And we need to take them out of that tribal mentality and get them to see the big picture that this is not working.
Yeah.
Having 2 tribes putting on that face paint and those uniforms every day and going to battle is not working.
Doesn't work. So one of the things I believe is that there's and I guess this talks about the left and the right, but there's CNN watchers and there's Fox watchers. And if you believe what CNN preaches, then you watch CNN religiously. And if you believe what Fox preaches, then you watch Fox religiously. And I never understood that. So I certainly have a political mindset of where I stand, but I always watch the stations and the news stations and the commentators and listen to the politicians that actually drive me crazy. I listen to those more than I listen to the ones that pat me on the back, because I already know what I know. So I want to hear what other people have to say, so I'm open-minded to change. Do you find that you can stand toe-to-toe with somebody that disagrees with you emphatically and have a real discussion without dehumanizing the person?
So by the way, many mornings I wake up and I work out in my basement, and I will watch 20 minutes of Fox and 20 minutes of CNN. And I encourage people to change the channel.
Yes.
If you're someone who is only watching Fox or only watching CNN, you must change the channel and spend an equal amount of time watching the other one, because it will change your perspective.
No question.
And we've got to get people out of their echo chambers where they only watch one or the other, and then they get on Facebook and they're surrounded by people who are like-minded, and they end up as part of that 10% or 11% on the other side. So we've got to encourage people to diversify their news sources, because it's different than when I grew up. When I grew up, we all had the same news. We agreed on a set of facts.
Correct.
It's no longer like that, and I think that's a real tragedy. And I've had people say, well, can't we regulate the news to fix that? But I believe in the freedom of the press and freedom of speech, so no, we can't do that. So the onus is on us as smart people, and Americans are smart people, to digest the news in an intelligent way.
Yeah. News has just become reality television for me, and it's whoever's speaking, that's their reality.
I saw this in my business career again. So my most successful business was an investment management business, and a lot of the investment shows, they sort of pretend to be information shows and analytical shows, but they're really entertainment.
Right.
And I now understand that politics is the same exact thing.
Yeah.
What you're watching is entertainment. It's not a search for truth most of the time.
Most of the time. And the challenge is the people that, I see the people that want to get involved in politics to make a real difference end up getting swayed one way or the other. I've never been a U.S. senator or a congressman, but I can only imagine walking into those chambers and the power of the influence of lobbyists, and it's going to be hard.
Yeah, so here's what happens. So a lot of smart, well-intentioned people run for office as a Democrat or as a Republican. I think there are a lot of good, smart people in both parties. Right. And they win an election, and now they go to Capitol Hill. And the first thing they do, by the way, is they divide into a group, and the Republicans go on a retreat, and the Democrats go on a retreat, and they get inculcated into their trap. But more importantly, what happens is that they're part of a party that has funded their election and that has the prospect of funding their re-election and gets money from different special interest groups. And now you're on Capitol Hill, and you've got these voices saying, hey, we've supported you, we're going to support you in the past, but we need you to vote a certain way. Right. And we need you to behave a certain way. And they fall in line. So even when they get there with good intentions. So think about how unbelievably powerful and liberating it would be for us as a country to have someone like me there, not part of either of those organizations, who has no allegiance to anybody other than the people of Maryland. Period.
But how do you stay unaligned? How do you listen? It takes a lot of willpower. It takes a lot of strength and a lot of belief to go into where many people have gone before and have had the same mindset as you. Nope, I'm going to do what's best for the people of Maryland. I'm going to do what's best for the people of Pennsylvania or whatever. And we're not talking about small funded operations that are lobbying our politicians. We're talking about very deep pocket politicians with a lot of power. How do you maintain that mental fortitude?
Listen, I hope I can do it. I hope I can do it, but I'm not beholden to anyone. Yeah. I will not be beholden to anyone when I'm there. And I think that is unique in the United States Senate and very powerful if we can do it.
So you mentioned you have 3 kids. What are their age?
20, 18, and 16.
20, 18, 16. So what do you tell them about the state of the union? What do you tell them about the current atmosphere in the United States?
So they've heard me talking about this for a long time, and we've talked about it at our breakfast table and dinner table for years. We talk about politics and what's going on in the world all the time. And I tell them that our government is dysfunctional. And I am embarrassed when they turn on the TV and listen to our elected leaders most of the time. It is embarrassing to me. I grew up when we had Jimmy Carter was a president when I was growing up, and Ronald Reagan, and they're very different politically, but we respected them regardless of their politics. We listened to them, we trusted them, and we were proud of the country that we were growing up in. And so much of that is not true anymore, and it's so disappointing to me that we've got too many elected leaders that we don't trust, that we feel like are putting their own agendas ahead of time. There's too much attacking, demonizing the other side by everybody, and I explained to them that I don't think that that's okay, and they know that that's a big part of why I'm running.
Yeah, I think there's 2 types of people in the world. I think there's people that make themselves look good on their own merits, and there's people that make themselves look good on the lack of others' merits. And it'll come out. As sure as I'm breathing, in the next 60 days, every political ad I see will be more about the lack of my opponent's merits than the case of my own merits. And I don't get that by dehumanizing others. And it's not just in the political atmosphere. I see it in kids. I see it in schools, or the way the bullying happens. I see we make ourselves look good by making other people look bad. And that, to me, is something that we have to figure out.
We do. And I think it's sad we've got a generation of people that are growing up that their role models are bullying, are denying facts, are attacking people who are critical of them, are attacking the press, are belittling people, are judging people based on what they look like. And none of that is okay, but that's the behavior that a generation of children are watching and will grow up to emulate. And that's got a long-term impact on our society that I'm really worried about.
Yeah, we don't have many rules in our house. We have values, and the number one value that we have, and I have twin 14-year-old daughters, is that we never ever make anybody feel less than. And I think that we don't see that anymore. I think that even people that, I see it all the time, the people that disapprove of President Trump and what he's doing and what he's standing for, and disapprove of some of the stuff he says, which is, some of it is just outrageous. They shouldn't be said. But what's amazing to me is I watch these people that disapprove of him, and they do the exact same thing they're criticizing him for doing. They call him names. They bash him on TV because he's doing it to somebody else. It's like, well, where does it stop? Where does if our elected officials are doing it and we're doing it about our elected officials, at some point it's got to stop.
Right. This morning I watched 20 minutes of CNN and 20 minutes of Fox, and on Fox they were talking about an episode where Ted Cruz and his wife, Heidi, I think her name is, Ted and Heidi Cruz, were in a restaurant in D.C., and there was a group of far-left activists that came into the restaurant and harassed them to the point where they had to leave the restaurant. And Fox, of course, was talking all about that. By the way, on CNN, the 20 minutes on CNN, they were grilling Brett Kavanaugh's attorney about things he wrote in his yearbook in high school and about some of the allegations that are serious and we need to dig into. But those are the two worlds that America woke up in today. So half of America woke up in a world where what they're hearing about is how the far left drove Ted and Heidi Cruz out of a restaurant, and half of the world woke up listening to a grilling of Brett Kavanaugh's attorney about his behavior in high school. So the media, by the way, is a big part of the problem here. The media is like the hammer that's slamming the wedge in our society, right? It's just hammering it day in and day out. And I even look at my own race. Listen, we are running a great campaign. I told you about the team we have and the fact we've outraised Cardin year to date. I met your people. Awesome. And we've and we're up on the air. We're the only candidate up on the air. We've been for weeks now running television commercials. We're polling better than any independent candidate in the country by far, better than any third-party candidate in the country by far, running for the United States Senate by far. And I'm a different type of candidate. I'm trying to represent the broad middle of this country. So you would think that would get a lot of media attention, right? The Washington Post and the Baltimore Sun basically refuse to cover the race. It doesn't feed the narrative that they love so much day in and day out, this blue versus red narrative. And then I look at the governor's race where it's not really a race. In fact, Governor Hogan on the last accounting had 24 times as much money as Ben Jealous, 24 times. On the last accounting, Senator Cardin had 4 times as much as us. So we're much closer financially. In the governor's race, he's polling to win by 22%. So it's hard to argue that that's a really close race. Both of those publications write about that race once or twice a day. And they don't cover our race. So there's this natural bias against anything that doesn't feed the tribal partisan narrative that the press just feeds off of.
So maybe if you were to jump up and down and start calling people names, all of a sudden they would cover you. And that's the saddest part.
It's sad, and people have said that to me. I had breakfast the other day with a national political correspondent. I'll leave nameless, and I said, "You're on CNN all the time. How do you do it?" He says, "They just tell me as long as I get on there and scream about the other guy, I'll leave him nameless also. They'll keep having me on." And that's not who I am. Because I want to be the guy who will go on both Fox and CNN, say the exact same thing, which will basically be on every issue. Listen, here's what the left are saying, and here's what they're not saying, and here's what the right is saying, and here's what they're not saying, and here's the rational solution to this, and why don't we all galvanize behind that? And say that on both stations. We don't have voices like that right now. We have voices that feed those extreme narratives on both sides.
Yeah. It's amazing. So a couple more questions, and I know you're crunched for time, but what is the long term solution for this, besides just obviously bringing people like yourself in and independents not getting to one left or one right to the far left or right? What's the long term solution for the getting America back to where you talked about at the beginning? When your parents came over here, the education system was much better. crime was much less. Every statistic you can think of was lower back then. How do we get back to that, or is it not even possible now?
So I think the long-term solution is political reform. So the parties have altered a lot of the rules in the system to benefit the extremes of the parties. So take, for example, gerrymandering.
Yeah.
So if you look at a congressional map of Maryland, what the Democrats have done in this state is a perversion of democracy. They've altered the shapes of the districts to benefit their party. The Republicans have done exactly the same thing in Texas and Wisconsin and other states. So both parties do it every chance we get. So they've reshaped the districts. Then they close primaries. So even though we all pay for primaries, not everyone can vote in them. Only the Democrats vote in the Democratic primary, Republicans in theirs. Independents like me can't vote in any primaries. So again, so now you end up with districts that have been shaped in a way to benefit the parties. Only the most liberal Democrats and most conservative Republicans vote in the primaries, so you get more and more extreme representatives. They've abused campaign finances to their benefit. They resist term limits. I'm in favor of term limits. And then even the rules within the Senate have been altered. Things like the way the hold rules and filibuster rules are abused by the two sides to avoid coming together around different issues to benefit the extremes. So all of these rules have been altered. So we need the long-term solution, and some of this stuff is hard, is a slate of political reform initiatives that will take the system back from the parties. The parties behave in a way where it's as if they feel the government is part of the political parties rather than the other way around. And remember, there are no parties in our Constitution. It's not supposed to be this way.
The biggest challenge to that, though, of course, is the people that need to change the rules are the ones that are changing the rules.
So the only way this happens is if you have somebody like me without a party label proposing it, and I get the American public behind it. So I'm in the United States Senate, and I get on TV every day and talking about how the parties have they're destroying the fabric of our democracy, and we need to change some of these rules back, get them back to where they were supposed to be. And then you have a long-term solution, because otherwise you have someone like me who I think can be really effective in the short term and propose legislation from the middle and bring the two sides together, but we could end up right back where we are now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. The only way you have a long-term solution, which was your question, is to change some of those rules back.
Awesome. All right. I have two non-political questions to ask you. First is, you have been a leader of huge companies. You just talked about a couple of them. What are the signs of a good leader? What are the attributes? What is the Neal Simon top 3 attributes of an amazing leader?
So first of all, I consider myself a little bit of a student of leadership. I've read a number of books about leadership, and I am fascinated by the topic. And I do believe there are different types of leaders and different styles that can be effective in different ways. I know what my style has always been. My style has always been to treat everyone around me equally. I've never led in any type of hierarchical way where I led by the power of my position. I've never done that. I've always tried to bring people together, to try to work with people to find the right answers, to get things done. I once had my head of administrative operations at my 100-person, $6 billion investment firm. She said to me once, she brought me this comic strip, and it was about servant leaderships, and she said, "Neal, this is you." So that's my style. I always tried to make people feel like I worked for them. They were in charge of their part of our business, and I was there to help them succeed. And that's my leadership style. That doesn't work for everyone. It's worked well for me in my career.
Okay, awesome. Servant leadership. So I think that I've heard that a lot from most of the people on the podcast. It's the number one thing that they say is servant leadership, work for others. So last question. So first, I want 2 questions. One, where do people find you? I'm saying obviously there's a ton of stuff, information, but if people want to find out more about Neal Simon, and then Neal Simon, Senator, to hopefully Senator,
right.
Where do they find you?
So our political page is nealsimon.com. It's NEALSIMON.com. And we've got a Facebook page and a Twitter page and an Instagram page. If you put in Neal Simon with NEAL and for Senate, you'll find all of those things.
Come up everywhere.
And there's a Wikipedia page that's somebody put together that's got a bunch of information about my career as well and my personal background.
Awesome. Okay. Last question. And that is, when you are done with all of this and you go on to live the rest of your life and you 100 years from now, 50 years from now, pass away, what do you want your contribution to this world to be? What is the one thing you want to have left this world?
So I feel like the history books are going to have a chapter about this era that we're in today, and it's going to be called Partisanship and Divisiveness. It's going to have start in the mid-90s and hopefully end this year. And it's going to be this really sad chapter, and people are going to read it and they're going to say, how did we let that happen? How did we let the extremes of the two parties take control of our government? And what I hope to do, and what I hope to be part of, in answer to your question, is the next chapter. That's a hopeful chapter, and it's about how the country came together. We started to resolve things like immigration and started to invest in infrastructure again and started to actually lower healthcare costs and improve our education system and deal with Social Security and reduce our debt and came together to start doing sensible things again. And I want to be part of that next chapter of history where the country turns the page and moves forward.
Awesome. All right, so only 45 days, you said? 40-some days?
42 days.
By the time this airs, it's going to be less than that, 40-some days. This is go time, I guess, right?
We are all in. I am Chad. I've never been half as passionate about anything I've done in my career. We are all in. We're doing this to win. We're up on the air. We're everywhere in the state. I'm on my way to Baltimore right after this.
Yeah, perfect.
And that's what we're doing.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you giving me the time. I definitely think I get precedent once you win as an interview as Senator Simon once you win. So I'll be calling you and everybody.
Please come visit in the Capitol.
So I'll be calling you. So I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much, brother.